Morning. We're at Cisco Boston, Plimpton, Massachusetts. We're here live with Owen Kenny from Downey Specialty Packers, and we're going to hear a little bit about the upcoming lobster season and what's going on. Owen, good morning.
Morning. So where we are in terms of lobster season right now is that we're kind of in the interim between seasons. Last significant processing in terms of North Atlantic lobster was around mid-January. So it's been a little while since new production's been run. Because of the warmer weather this winter, we'd anticipate a spring that opens on time or even a little earlier than it has past years. We potentially could see the opening of the major spring seasons in Canada in terms of active fishing May 1st or even a little bit earlier. There's some proposals out there for that. Unlike last winter, we're going to have a opening that's on time and active production by the time we hit early May.
What is the season going to, if you were looking at a crystal ball, going to be price-wise? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think what we're taking a look at right now in the marketplace is that as a whole, the industry has very little inventory on hand. This past year, we've seen unprecedented demand driving the market for lobster meat higher than it's ever been before. So where we are right now is really at the high in the marketplace, and inventories over the winter are going to continue to be diminished. They're going to be very, very thin in terms of lobster meat by the time we open in the spring. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure in the marketplace for that new season production. So in all likelihood, you're going to see a market that's going to stay high through early spring, and then even once the season reopens, because of the lack of inventory out in the marketplace and the heavy levels of demand, you're likely to see pricing start high in the spring in order to meet that demand. Where it goes from there depends on a whole bunch of different variables, everything from what happens in terms of Chinese buyers coming over from Southeast Asia, the currency exchange, the amount of landings, the pace of landings, a whole bunch of different variables that we don't know quite yet. So, in terms of pricing, what you can talk about is sort of what we know and what the situation is right now. And like I said, the situation right now is not going to change in the next couple months. The only time that it will change is once we get into large-scale active production and the new season starts.
I see a lot of articles lately about people serving lobster rolls around the country in New York, LA, Florida, New England lobster rolls. Is that a new phenomenon?
It is, to a large degree. One of the things that has driven the marketplace in lobster is particularly in the U.S. is a large-scale expansion regionally, well past New England. Lobster rolls have no longer become sort of just a singular regional phenomenon. It's all over the country. It's on the West Coast, it's in the South, it's in the Midwest, it's in the Southeast, and you've got lobster roll trucks, you've got fast serve, single serve concepts that are serving lobster rolls as the primary focus of their restaurant. And as that demand has exploded, that's all really cumulatively in the past couple of years. So in addition to that, you also have a large scale increase in lobster meat usage, particularly as an appetizer segment. There was an article recently in Fast Casual magazine that talked about how lobster meat applications as appetizers have increased 55% year over year in terms of menus across the U.S. That's a dramatic increase, and one of the big reasons, in addition to sort of the expansion nationally, all over the country, is just proliferation of lobster on different menu applications, and that's again one of the big things that's driven demand and driven the marketplace in terms of lobster here in the U.S.
Now, Down East runs, I believe, 4 plants now, and you also bought into a live trade business recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Down East Cape Ball Packers is one of the largest processors of North Atlantic lobster out there. In terms of capacity, our plants are located in New Brunswick, and we have a large-scale operation, both on the processing side, but also to the point you just made, Ron, also on the live procurement side. This past year, we acquired a company called Wedgeport Lobster, which is one of the largest live lobster dealers in Nova Scotia, to give us increased access to the resource. In addition to Wedgeport as a live lobster dealer and direct access to the resource there, we also have 3 buying stations throughout New Brunswick, PEI, and northern Nova Scotia, which we own and basically provide resource, ice, bait, etc. to fishermen so that we have direct access to the resource there. In addition to that, we also have a partnership for live lobster procurement out of Maine and purchase a good deal of lobster out of Maine as well.
Oh, and give me a quick breakdown. I have a lot of customers that like to buy live lobsters, break them down in their kitchen. They don't take out all the leg meat like you folks do and everything. So if I had 100 pounds of lobsters, what would I get out of that?
So even at a processor level, and yields vary a little bit throughout the season because you're dealing with certain seasons where there's a predominant supply of hard shell lobster versus soft shell. You get a significantly reduced yield on soft shell. But let's just say conservatively, if you were trying to do it in the back of the house in the kitchen, one of the things that you would see is really poor and inconsistent yields. For instance, on a cooked shucked claw and knuckle meat, if you're not including the leg meat, you're probably going to get somewhere in the vicinity on your average, maybe 6.5% to 7.5% yield of cooked shucked claw and knuckle meat. And then if you were going to cook the rest of the creature, say the tail, maybe that adds another 15%. So you're getting just north of 20% in terms of your yield, if you're lucky. And that may be inconsistent depending on who's in the back, that kind of thing. So breaking down a lobster, you get a very, very poor yield unless you're doing it at a professional level. Even the yields that we get aren't that much higher than that, and that's us extracting every last piece of usable lobster meat from that lobster. And one of the things that we say, and one of the things that you see out there in the marketplace is, particularly, there's always this inclination, oh, I'll cook it in the back and I'll do it myself, but those tend to be the same concepts that don't make any money at the end of the year in their lobster roll because they can't control their yields, their costs are going all over the place, they have a tremendous amount of labor. And the other big problem with breaking down lobsters in the back of the house is on a QA, QC level. One of the things that we do is in all of our plants, we have a unified QC program that's one of the strictest in the business. Breaking down and cooking lobsters is something that you really need to stay on top of, particularly from a food safety aspect, unless you are utilizing the right procedures, unless you really are on top of it. There's a significant risk of food safety concerns with a cooked product, particularly cooking large-scale amounts of lobster. There's also a significant allergy concern if you're doing it in the back of the kitchen yourself. So we take all of that guesswork out of it, we take all of the yield variability out of it, and allow anyone who's out there to have a top quality, consistent product all the time.
One question answer. $5 a pound live lobster. What's it cost me when I take out the claw, knuckle, and tail meat?
You're probably looking at something that is going to be, and again, depends on sort of the, hard shell, soft shell firms. It sort of depends where it is, but you're going to be looking at something that in a minimum cost to them is going to be nearing the $30 range, and that doesn't include labor, it doesn't include any variability, and it's going to be, sometimes it'll be 30, sometimes it'll be 35, and it'll be changing all the time, constantly. So it's just a very difficult thing to pin down if you're doing it yourself and you don't have a professional large-scale operation in order to do that.
Lastly, we've got some good news in the last month. It's legal to sell in-shell raw lobster tails. 2 years ago they repealed the slaughter law in Massachusetts. Is it ever going to happen in Rhode Island, do you think?
I think the news in New Hampshire is a big deal in terms of the ability to sell shell-on tails in New Hampshire. For a lot of years that was restricted. We've seen New England continually sort of overturn what were the old laws about lobster mutilation, which were put in place basically in order to regulate fishermen, but didn't necessarily apply to the processing sector. New Hampshire's brand new. That legislation was passed and approved and put into effect in January. From what the understanding is, there is nothing on the near future in Rhode Island, but it is one of the few and last states in New England that does not allow the sale of shell-on lobster tails. So hey, hopefully things improve going forward and we can get some things moving forward in that aspect.
Thank you, Owen.
Hey, thank you.